recording. All right. So like I said, at this point, you know, we've got legs on. We're starting to get to explore the mirror modifier over here. We've even got our table here. One of the things you will notice is we've got, and this is something good to talk about today as well, we've got this kind of faceted shading going on, right? Where it kind of almost looks like a gem, where these don't look like one piece. Kind of each polygon looks independent. That is actually your normal smoothing direction, right? What happens is these polygons, they meet at an edge, right? There's an edge between these polygons. And that angle, there's an angle those polygons meet at, right? And what happens is if the smoothing angle to blend the normal directions to make it look collectively shaded, like it's all one piece and smooth, by default the angle's set pretty low in Blender, right? And that's why you get that faceted look. So what we need to do is kind of tell it to have basically a higher smoothing angle so that these look smooth shaded. One of the easiest ways to do that, and remember 4 is your quick key for object mode. Although remember, it is a mode right here, but 4 is the object mode quick key. I've already got the legs selected, so I'll just kind of, work on that. And what we can do is, there we go. What we can do is we can go to the little green triangle right here. Right now, we've only really been looking at the blue wrench, which is where we can add our mirror modifier, and that's basically it, right? So we can go to triangle here, and eventually I'm going to show you add-ons like auto mirror and loop and cut tools. We just haven't quite needed them yet, and it's good to get some practice doing this without add-ons. But we're going to eventually start showing that, honestly, probably on the next project. But there is a green triangle, because remember, this whole bottom menu here is really your properties menu, right? And you've got lots of different properties, right? The white wrench and screwdriver at the top is kind of your tool properties. These control a lot of your rendering settings. Down here, the kind of reddish kind of checkerboard and ball are your material texture stuff. Blue wrench, of course, is modifier, and we'll talk about a few of these other ones. But the green triangle kind of controls things like the name of your UV maps. But also there's a section, so you just click on the green triangle. There's a section called normals, right? You just left click on normals. This opens this up. Oh, also, when you get a chance, show me your green check. Right, thank you. And so what we can do is we can click on this auto smooth feature right here, right? So once you click on auto smooth, you might need to tell it to have a degree. So in this case, we'll set that to 180, right? And that's just kind of good to have on, although actually auto smooth itself will usually do it. But there's this other thing we need to do, right? So having auto smooth on is usually a good idea. You could set the degree. 180 is kind of safe. But the other thing is, and I'm going to go back to this guy and set that as well. So I'll just, since I'm still in 4 for object mode, I can click on this. And this is the kind of stuff you don't have to really worry about doing right now, right? The modeling is more important. This is the kind of thing that if you just want to ask questions about it later this week, right? Or even a couple weeks from now, don't sweat it, right? This is more, I wanted to inform you guys how to do this than that you need to do it for modeling, right? It's just to make the model look a little bit nicer, basically. So 4 for object mode, right? And I can just go click on the tabletop. Remember, your outliner can allow you to click on them as well. And I'll just turn on auto smooth there, and maybe just 180 just to make sure, right? 180 degrees. Keep typing in the wrong numbers. There we go. But also, and I'll go back to blue wrench now because we're going to be doing more stuff with the blue wrench anyways today. But green triangle, normals, you can kind of turn that on if you need it. Sometimes you don't need it, but it's good to know about it. But also in object mode, right? 4, right? 4 is the quick key for object mode. Remember, it is a menu right here, object mode. One of the things that you can do that I haven't really discussed yet is we know left click is our primary interaction method, right? It allows us to select stuff. It allows us to grab our manipulator handles, right? Really, you do most of your stuff in Blender with left click, sometimes middle click. But if you right click, what right click does, it brings up a context menu. In this case, I'm in object mode, so it brings up an object context menu. And like I said, if you're still having questions about this part, you can ignore it for now because you can still model and do all your modeling, and it's just to kind of make the shading look better. At the very top of the object context menu is something called Shade Smooth. what that does is you see how it kind of blends the normals together. So I can click on this object down here again, the legs, right click. Right click brings up the context menu. You don't have to hold down right mouse button on this one, right? Usually with the left click, if it's selected, you just left click. But if you're actually grabbing a manipulator handle, you have to left drag, right? You have to hold down left mouse button. But this is a right click feature. And at the very top is Shade Smooth. You see how it kind of goes in here and smooth shades that stuff, right? So just kind of wanted to make sure you guys know how to do your shade smoothing and even know that you have auto smooth here as well. Like I said, you could always turn on auto smooth and maybe leave the 30-degree mark there. But you see how you can actually change that? Like maybe 60 will be better for certain parts, right? So you can always play with the controls a little bit, right? You kind of saw how the shading on the bottom got a little bit too smooth. So you can always go back in here and say, hey, let's try 60 or 70. And you see how you're still getting nice smoothing everywhere, except maybe at the bottom where you don't need it. So auto smooth with that smoothing kind of gives you some controls for doing your smoothing with these controls, right? But generally you also have to right click Shade Smooth to actually properly tell it to shade smooth. Like we said, this is not something you have to do right now, right? You can still model and everything's fine. It has that kind of faceted, blocky look a little bit, right? Shading wise. But I figured good to get you an introduction video on that at least some point. And we can keep talking about it as we go along. So you don't need that to model. If that's still a little bit crazy to you, it's okay. Don't sweat it too much right now. You can still do everything else and then come back and do it later, right? But probably even the biggest starting point, if you can't remember the face normal stuff, is just right click Shade Smooth. Shade Flat will do the reverse, right? It'll flat shade everything again, kind of break the normals so they won't blend together to create that smoother look. All right, just kind of a little bit about that stuff. Now what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you how to kind of create an inset for the table here. And this will actually be, besides what I just showed you, this will be kind of the big new thing for today, right? So I'm going to select the tabletop because, right, we're in 4 for object mode, right? Object mode is right here, though. And that allows you to just left click on objects. And you see that kind of have that orange outline. Remember, you can always grab them from the outliner up here as well. And I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. Although remember, edit is a mode, right? So there's these 2 modes here. If you click on the pull down menu right here, object mode 4, edit mode 1. So you can turn edit mode or object mode on without the quick key. And then of course there's the buttons for vertex, edge, face right there. Well, we know those quick keys, those will be coming up in the mini quizzes next week, right? I'll start to talk about those in the mini quizzes next week. But 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Technically 5 is sculpt mode, right? So there's a lot of great quick keys that are just those numbers on top. So just remember, 1, 2, 3, 4 are basically all your selection modes. So 3 is face, and I just want to left click on this top face, right? Now remember, I have clipping on, so if I try to move this top face, it doesn't pull that center off. However, if I use this specific tool I'm about to use, the inset does need to have an option change to keep these together in the center. The Inset Tool does have a quick key, I for Inset. But it is actually a tool right here. You see how it's kind of in between the Extrude tool and the Bevel tool, right? So remember, we're in Modeling Workspace. Remember, you can click on these tabs to switch to Modeling Workspace. And we have Extrude here. We have Bevel here, Loop Cut. But also there's a tool right here called Inset. Inset is actually basically an Extrude tool, but instead of allowing you to move out, it scales. But it scales evenly, right? So your regular scale tool won't necessarily scale that shape evenly. This will try to kind of keep the border geometry that will be the result of the inset evenly spaced around the whole shape. That's what's cool about it. So I'm going to click Inset, and it says, kind of brings up a handle. Remember, whenever you see kind of that yellow kind of line with the circle or this, those are your controls. Although, middle mouse button will control these also. So if I was to just hold down middle mouse button, you see how that can actually do it also? So you see when I inset, it's kind of doing something like an extrusion, right? It's taking that face, it's moving it somewhere. In this case, it's scaling it. That's what's different about the Inset tool over the Extrude tools. Instead of moving it somewhere, it scales it down, right? Now, that brings it in, and you see how kind of the space around here is the same. It's uniform. It's even. That's what's cool about this. Scale wouldn't, if you did extrude and then scale, it wouldn't be the same, right? You would actually probably see it be thinner here and then thicker here, right? That's one of the reasons why inset is useful. You do notice, though, and I'm still in that same inset, so I kind of insetted it once, but I haven't turned the tool off. I haven't insetted again, right? You have to remember to kind of say, hey, I'm insetting once, and then I'm going to play with the options. You'll notice, though, that the center is not, it's not one polygon. So remember at the bottom, just like bevel, is the options box. It's right here down at the bottom. If I left click on that, it opens this up. So any tool that you're using, you will see an easy access options box down here that you can either open or close. A lot of times you won't need the options box, and so you just kind of leave it closed and use your tool. But when you do need it, you can open it up or close it, and it's just left click. Remember, it's in the bottom left corner. It's kind of up, out in the viewport just a little bit. Boundary is what I want to check on, and you can actually even tell it to not offset even, and you have some of these other controls, but I want boundary off. And you see when I uncheck boundary, it actually properly makes these one shape. Now, if you're doing inset on a different part of the model that's not over that center, you won't even need to worry about this. Turning off boundary is really when you're kind of at that, when you're doing something on polygons at the center of a model, where it would do that, where it would break it apart. So turn off boundary, and it just kind of creates that nice little bit of kind of border there that's even. And then I can do extrusion in to create kind of a little bit of an inset for our table. Right? So inset tool, kind of neat, right? Kind of cool. Gives us that. Good old extrude though, right? We can just extrude it. Remember, anytime you extrude or inset, it is taking that polygon you have selected, and it's either scaling it like inset or moving it like extrude to a different place, or scaling it to a smaller or bigger size. But you'll notice that the polygons that were originally next to it don't get moved. That's because when you do extrude or inset, it creates new geometry between those, so that this shape gets left alone, this shape gets adjusted, and it creates new geometry there to connect it. So anytime you extrude or inset, new polygons will be created. That's the whole point, right? So it's not just moving it down, it's extruding it. It's insetting because you want new geometry to also be there. So it's kind of cool because inset can be useful, right? And just to show you, you don't always have to use inset on, with boundary, right? I'm not going to actually do this. I'm going to undo it in a second here. But if I use inset, you say you can inset without having to worry about boundary being turned off. Because here, this inset is not at the center, right? So boundary can stay on and you're fine. So you won't always need that option. But particularly over like the center of the table, you kind of want to know about that boundary option being something you can turn off. So if you're not insetting at the center, don't worry about that boundary checkbox being off. If you are, uncheck it so that you get that nice seamless form there. All right. So that's all the new stuff I want to show today, but I did want to do some old stuff to create more parts. So in this case, I'm going to go to 4 for object mode. Right? So 4 for object mode. It's the quick key. Remember, you can always go to this menu up here and switch to object mode. Remember, when you want to add a totally new object, go to the Add menu. Add menu. This is exactly how we did the legs the last couple of days. So I can go to Mesh, and I'm going to add a cube again, right? So Add, Mesh, Cube. At this point, you see how we're getting a lot of repeat in the lectures? Because that's the whole point, to get you used to a lot of these major functions and tools by constantly using them. Also, because they're so good and so useful, you're often going to use them. We're going to keep seeing these on all the models we build this whole semester, right? So add mesh cube. I'm eventually going to show you guys the add primitive tool, which is quite cool, but we don't really need it right now. And it'll probably be a little tricky for you guys to learn as beginners. So we'll get to that later, probably our ship. Edit mesh cube. And that creates a new cube object right here, right? Now remember, we really like this center being here, the cursor, right? Being on the center of the world. Your center, that little orange dot being on the center of the world. That's going to allow our mirror to work properly. Can we reset this back to there later on? Yeah, but that's more steps that you guys have to do and remember to do. So for me, it's just easier to not have to do that if we don't need to. So when you go to add mesh cube, it will create it right in the center. You see it's got that orange outline. At this point, what we can do is we can easily just switch to face mode, right? 3 for faces. Or like we said, just go edit mode and then switch to the selection type you want. And the cool thing is all your faces will already be selected. If not, you can always go select all or even select linked, which we've talked about a couple times. And we're going to keep talking about this semester. It's just like anything, we have to show it to you once at first, right? And then hopefully we repeat it again and again so that, you know, it seeps in. So remember, our selection tool's here. Q is the quick key. Our move tool's right here. W is the quick key, right? With W on, remember, I can grab any one of these 3 handles. So I can hold down my left mouse button on that red handle, and it will only move along the x-axis. You see how that center is staying on the center? Because I'm not moving the object, I'm moving the polygons inside the object. This is one of those weird things where objects in 3D are actually kind of more like an invisible box that you can put a bunch of polygons into that don't actually have to touch, right? So you can actually move the polygons inside an object without moving the object. That's why we're doing this, right? So that way the center of the object still thinks it's on the center of the world, because we're not moving the object, we're moving the polygons that are inside the object. Objects themselves are kind of a little bit more of a nebulous concept than you think, right? It's really just an object classification that's got polygons inside it. And those polygons could be all over the place. We can actually join and separate objects, which we'll see more as we go along. Of course, our mini quiz for tomorrow is going to be scale tool, and R is the quick key for that, right? It's right here, but R is the quick key for it. Now, remember, you can scale any one of these handles, but there's also the white circles, and that's your scale all of the axes at the same time. Now, here's the thing, though. Middle mouse button will also do that. So I could, of course, left-click drag on the white, and see how it scales the whole thing. But middle mouse button will also do that. And then, of course, I could scale just along the red to make it thinner, just along the blue to make it thinner, along the green to make it thinner, to give us kind of a brace. Maybe W for move again, right? Move that over on the red. And give us a nice little brace there, right? Now, at this point, I want there to be kind of a brace going here as well. And instead of making a new object, one of the things that we can actually do is mesh duplicate. Mesh duplicate. Control D is the quick key. What this does, if I duplicate, and you can actually move it anywhere, right? You can just left click move. It actually copies those polygons inside the object. So it's still all one object, but you've actually made a copied new polygons. So I could move these, I could hit E for rotate. Remember, yesterday's quiz was the rotate tool, right? E for rotate, but it is also right here. I could left click drag on that blue handle. W for move, I can move it up. Now, just to highlight what that select linked feature does, if I was to grab a face on this, and I go to select linked, these are one object, right? You see how select linked only grabs the directly connected polygons? these polygons are all still one cube object. But, as you'll see, they're not directly touching each other. But these polygons are directly kind of merged or welded to it. So that's what select linked is actually doing. So you can always just take some polygons you have selected, and you can always just duplicate them. Control D. Now in this case, I don't really want this polygon to be over the center line, so I'll move it back over here a little bit. I'm also going to delete that face. Delete. Faces. And then I'm just going to left click on this face, right, because we're still in 3 for face mode. I'm just going to go over and left click. Now you notice you don't have to turn your move tool off. That can stay on as you go select different polygons. I can move this one in here. Maybe move it forward. All right. Now in this case, I actually kind of think I want to do a similar thing here because I want to do the same mirroring trick. So I feel like I'm going to probably grab this whole polygon, right? Select linked. Move this over a bit. Move it just past that red line a little bit. Delete that face, right? Select it. Delete on your keyboard faces. Select that face. Move it kind of back in here a little bit. Maybe over just a bit as well. There we go. And now, of course, I can go to 4 for object mode. But I did make sure to delete those faces on the ends, right? And this is new stuff, so you don't have to have this done for progress check today, but it's to give you guys new stuff to work on over the next day or two, right? And with that back in object mode, right? 4 for object mode. I can go to add modifier mirror. And remember, we can actually turn on X and Y at the same time. I do like to turn the triangle on as well. And we do want to turn clipping on, right? So that blue wrench gives us that ability to add modifier mirror, right? And of course, like the legs, we can turn on X and Y at the same time. That's why, kind of why I made sure to kind of make them more like halves, right? But there's a gap here. Well, the cool thing is clipping can fix this for us. So I'm going to go to 2 for edge mode on this, right? So this object will still select. I'm going to go to 2 for edge mode. If I double left click, that selects that edge loop, right? Double left click selects any edge loop, even a border edge loop. And with clipping on, if I move these towards the center, they'll automatically weld together and stay together. So double left click, move those towards the center, and now you see how they won't come apart? So clipping is actually super cool that way, in the sense that you could actually leave that slight gap, just move them towards that center for that mirror access, and clipping will automatically kind of weld them and keep them in place. So you see how clipping is actually really, really, really cool. Clipping is neat. All right, I think that'll be good for now. We'll probably maybe come back and do a little more work on this on Friday. Maybe start a bit of a new project, a new model as well, but I think that'll work for today. I think that's enough for today for a new video. All right, so we'll stop there.